Yesterday, the World Bank released its latest Nigeria development update, and today it is making the front pages across the country. The report acknowledges that recent reforms under President Bola Tinubu, such as fuel subsidy removal and foreign exchange liberalization, have helped stabilize public finances, but it also paints a troubling picture. Poverty in Nigeria is not easing, but worsening. Now, according to the bank, the number of Nigerians living below the poverty line has jumped from 81 million in 2019 to 139 million this year. Extreme poverty has nearly doubled, with food inflation identified as a major driver. Prices of staples like rice and yams have risen by more than 400%, pushing millions of families into hardship. Now, the bank warns that without urgent measures to reduce food costs, expand social safety nets, and improve spending on health and education, poverty could peak at 141 million people by 2026. But the federal government has strongly rejected these figures, arguing that they exaggerate Nigeria's situation and fail to account for the strength of the informal economy. So how do we make sense of these conflicting narratives? What does this mean for governance, policy, and the lived realities of Nigerians? Now, to help us unpack this morning, we're joined by Professor Shehu Abdullahi Zuru, the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, former Dean of the Faculty of Law at Nile University in Abuja, an author, university administrator, and development economist. Professor, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, let's start from the top, I would say. The World Bank's report says that poverty in Nigeria has worsened from 81 million up until 139 million as of today. So how would you interpret these numbers, and do they truly capture Nigeria's poverty in reality?
Thank you so much. Good morning, Nigerians. Honestly speaking, the figures are very troubling. They are a signature of collective national tragedy. But no matter how nationalistic would like to be by rejecting these figures, I am of the opinion that if a more carefully empirical study were to be conducted by any of the Nigerian universities rather than the World Bank, probably that would have lent more credibility to the report. And I'm sure, I'm not arguing about the percentage presented by the World Bank. Those of us who travel a lot to the countryside will argue that the figure presented by the World Bank lacks empirical accuracy. On the fundamentals of superior common sense, it can be argued that the situation is worse than that. It's worse than presented by the World Bank. And the problem with administrators all over the world, particularly in the third world, is this. They base the index of national economic performance and national prosperity on some outlandish graphics from either the banking regulatory agencies or hired guns, consultants. For you to make a proper and most appropriate assessment of poverty index, in a country like Nigeria, I believe the most veritable reference point will be the main street rather than the high street. If you base your index on the fundamentals of the high street market, you are likely to get it wrong. And when people talk about strong private sector, it begs the question, what private sector are we talking about here? I don't have an appreciable sense of what private sector performance is in Nigeria. What you have is a bunch of market speculators masquerading as industrialists and who enjoying government patronage. And these are the people that usually feed the government with wrong indexes, economic indexes. Right. This is my view.
All right. So at this point, with reports from the federal government that poverty levels are coming down, and this recent report today, yesterday by the World Bank, do you think that it is justifiable the continued investment in expensive subsidy reforms or social protection schemes when poverty rates keep rising? And is the government just reshuffling poverty rather than reducing it?
Well, I don't know who is advising the government on the issue of poverty in the country. I don't know, but I can just make a wild guess that perhaps the central bank is the one providing most of these statistics. Like I said, beautifully crafted graphics from the regulatory authorities do not capture the real dynamics of national poverty. I am of the view that poverty is not coming down, it's rising. But let us narrow down to the definition of poverty itself. What is poverty? Obviously, it is lack of financial resources, lack of material possession that will enable citizens or citizen of a country to be to be able to afford the basic human needs of housing, food, and education, health and education. If we look at these variables, whoever is making this contestable claim that the level of poverty is coming down in the country is only being economical with the truth. And the truth of the matter is maybe at the formal level, maybe if you look at the construction industry in Nigeria, it could be tempting for you to assume that because of volume of activities going on, that eventually could have a cascading positive consequences on the general economy. But in Nigeria, that's not the case. Most of the common people in this country are excluded from the paradigm of the formal economy. They live their lives, make their trading, their basic economic activities within the informal economy and the informal sector of the national economy. And if we are to go by that, I don't think there is any seriously minded person that will sit here and make a claim that the poverty level in the country is reducing. It is not. On the issue of subsidy, oil subsidy savings, well, interestingly, that is my area. I read petroleum law and policy, so I know what subsidy is. The subsidy regime of the country, I have to admit, has failed the country in the past. But I think what is even more troubling for the national economy and the general well-being of the country is how the savings from quote-unquote subsidy savings is being managed in the country. You could have sparsely evidence of deployment of subsidy savings, maybe in the transportation sector. But in terms of human capital development, zero. Thank you.
Thank you for explaining the subsidy removal because the federal government keeps talking about the reforms that they have been able to put in place to help cushion the effect of poverty in Nigeria, and one of them is the removal of the fuel subsidy, and also of course the changing of the rates, the exchange rates, I beg your pardon. So but if millions of Nigerians are pushed deeper into poverty, can these reforms still be, called a success? Because at the end of the day, if the government says, oh, we have been able to, remove the fuel subsidy and also, the exchange rate unification, it shows that, these reforms should help cushion, the effects of poverty in Nigeria.
Well, the truth of the matter is, when you look at privatization of the oil and gas industry all over the world, and you look at the state of the Nigeria's oil and gas industry vis-a-vis the question of subsidy, obviously, how it was done in the country appeared, not to have been well thought through. You can't remove oil subsidy when you don't have functional oil refineries. And I could remember there was a paper I was commissioned to write for a federal government in this country on oil subsidy. And that was exactly what I said. Forget about removal of oil subsidy. The problem with that is this. If you look at the average economic life of Nigerian, both in the city and in the countryside, it is linked to government activities. And the subsidy, as it were, must have to be well structured, well managed in such a way that the cascading adversarial consequences on the national economy and by extension on Nigerians will be avoided. In this case, that has not been the case. On the issue of liberalization of the foreign exchange market, there is no country at the level of national development that will say that their economy is strong enough to liberalize the foreign exchange rate, particularly the way it was done in the country. If you look at the national economy, our national economy, I mean, let's recognize this for what it is and say it as it is. It's an economy right from independence that has suffered from the Dutch disease, what the economists call the Dutch disease, where the index of national prosperity is based on a foreign currency, the performance of a foreign currency. We sell our product and we priced our product, particularly the international commodities, on the basis of the foreign currency of another country. Here I'm talking about the dollar. Liberalizing exchange rate when you have a very weak national economy is a beautiful invitation to national disaster. And like we have said, it has not in any way impacted positively on the issue of poverty reduction in the country. Rather, it accelerated it unabatedly. Because even people who plant their corns in the villages, when they take them to the market, they price it by making a shot across the bow reference to the dollar. And by so doing, it has made even the local products beyond the reach of the common man, in the country. So when economists sit down in the cozy offices of their regulatory agencies and start talking about liberalization, I laugh because privatization, even after privatization, you do have what you call post-privatization regulations. Now, this is a superimposed imperative in order to protect strategic national interest. There was a British scholar that has made extensive research on that, Professor Professor Littlechild. He conducted privatization of the UK's water industry and the post-privatization regulation. And I think unless we adopt the same template, the same model, we shall continue to deceive ourselves.
Should Nigerians believe or still have hope and faith that these short-term reforms that are hurting the citizens but then these reforms are promising future benefits? Should Nigerians judge it as a progress or a failure in real human terms?
Well, I think for me, I have said that before. A pessimist is he who sees difficulties in every opportunity, and an optimist is he who sees opportunity in every difficult situation. Leaning on that, perhaps one can only adopt the proposition of Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, when he said that he was a stubborn optimist. Perhaps that is also a principle that I've adopted. I have chosen to be a stubborn optimist. But if you ask me whether the road ahead is in any way reassuring, I will tell you no. Unless government sits down and revise the current economic template, with a view to getting it right and making it conscientiously human-driven or human capital development-driven, we will continue to assume that generated graphics of the central bank will give us a fair view of the performance of the national economy, which, like I have alluded to previously, is the wrong approach. Government must have to go back and conduct a holistic review of its national economic template in order to remedy the obvious negative consequences of the current national economic policy that we see on the street. Not on the high street, but on the street. And that's basically what I can say on this issue.
All right, let's look at it from a different perspective, Professor. Now, is the World Bank itself part of the problem? Has donor aid and technical support over the past 20 years helped Nigeria fight poverty, or just made it dependent on external validation as well?
Well, I think if we take the history of the World Bank, and in particular its own involvement in promoting what I would call Ponzi national economic policies, you could say that the bank has performed as an organ of neo-imperialism. And because most of their reform packages that they promote to most developing countries are not in all sincerity meant to trigger growth in the national economies of those countries, but rather to create a system of slavery to the international financial systems. And serious countries, including few in Africa, have rejected such advocacies of the World Bank. So I think every sovereign country would have to make its own choices. Whether what matters to you is the sincerity or purpose of most of these programs being promoted by the World Bank or not. And if you are to make a dispassionate assessment of most of the promoted, bungled packages of national economic reforms, one thing stands out clearly. that they do not mean well. They do not mean well. They do not mean well about the proposed reforms. Let me give you an example. During Babangida's administration, the World Bank sold this idea to Babangida to privatize our national economy and to also reduce the value of the national currency. I could remember the then Minister of Finance, one Dr. Kalu Ideka Kalu, who was a trainee or a protege of the same institution, was appointed the finance minister of this country and pushed so hard those policies, claiming outlandishly that there were no alternatives to those proposed reforms. As we sit here, Nigerians are still paying a price for the implementation of the SAP program by Babangida's administration. And history, like it was said and is still being said, those who ignore history are doomed to repeating it. I believe if we have been very patriotic, very dispassionate in national economic engineering based on our peculiar exigencies, I think Nigeria, in terms of economic development, would have done better than leaning on these Eurocentric packaged economic reforms by the three centers of international capitalism, particularly the World Bank.
All right. So, come to think of it and looking at it from another point of view, how do you think the government can justify prioritizing debt servicing when most of the time it is a large percentage of the revenue, while Nigerians go without basic food and services? And is Nigeria bankrupt morally before it is physically?
Well, I think I can understand where government is coming from. Because you have these international rating agencies. The most popular is the Moody rating agency. They rate the economic performance of countries all over the world, particularly the World Bank. Particularly the developing countries. And there is national sensitivity to the potential of those agencies downgrading the credibility of your national economy, because what that does is to paint the picture that you are not worthy of being either admitted into the global economy, or you don't have a gauged credibility to enjoy external funding, external borrowing. Like I said, so government obviously must be thinking along that angle. But there are countries that we know, let me give an example of Cuba in Latin America, that has rejected the obsession about, the rating by these agents of international financial institutions, and closed its own border and gave itself 10 years or roll out a development plan where they would like to see the country get to in the next 10 years. And they worked assiduously towards achievement of those national goals, and that has succeeded. Mao Zedong does the same thing in China during the agricultural revolution in China. They also did the same thing. Now, it takes a lot of courage, daring courage on the part of a country to be able to extricate itself from the slavery of the international financial institutions. So maybe in order to continue to enjoy international financial patronage from these international financial agencies could have been the anchor of government's current debt servicing regime. Maybe, and perhaps just maybe. Thank you.
All right. I believe we're running out of time, but before we go, when we look at it like this, beyond the slogans and short-term fixes, what structural reforms should Nigeria actually commit to, especially in areas like land reform, education quality, as well as industrial policy?
Well, I think the closer we came to developing a national consensual economic blueprint was during the time of General Abacha, when he assembled, as it were, the best brains drawn from the industry, the academia, and policymakers, and charged them with the task of generating Vision 2020. I believe this government has the golden opportunity to do that. There is no way, because there is no way we can sit back here and assume that things will just work out because we are prayerful. I think we have been fantasizing about prayer therapy, which has never worked. I think we better wake up from our slumber and confront our challenges fair and square. You look at the situation in Nigerian universities. It's laughable. It's laughable. We all know that throughout human history, that civilization usually advances on the basis of credible educational system. But in Nigeria, sadly we have to say that is, we appear not to pay serious attention to the educational system in the country. You look at the industries as well. Why I question the logic of private sectoring within our national economy is this: a developing country like Nigeria cannot begin to de-invest from the productive sector of the national economy and emphasizing on the service sector of the economy. It will not work. Even the UK government is just discovering that. And that's the reason why they are on the brink of a major recession in the UK. Right. So I think what government must do is to commission its own vision, maybe.
All right. We've run out of time, but thank you very much, Professor Shehu Abdullahi Zuru, for being here and helping us unpack, this World Bank report stating that Nigeria is in deep poverty. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me.